Ich bin bereit, starte the stream. Hello and welcome to a next episode of the Angular Vienna Meetup. Today, special event because we will try to live stream that. The first link already died. We have a second link now. All good things are three. And without further delay, I will start into our meetup introduction. First of all, thank you a lot for showing up. It is really nice to see that more and more people show up regularly and more new faces join us. Also on every meetup. That is a pretty cool thing. What we will see today, as you can already see on the image, we have a name duo today, Julian and Julia. They have different presentations but share the same name. And I'm not sure if they share the same hair color, we can figure it out later, but let me introduce you to our agenda first. So intro, that's the thing that is happening right now. So while I am speaking to you, intro is taking place. Crazy, I know. After that intro, there will be a couple of more slides, but then the intro is over officially and we transition into our talk part of the meetup. The first talk is from Julian, Cut My Task into Pieces. I don't know which band name this is, but most probably it's a song name. And he will show us how to schedule work in the browser and how to cut tasks or his tasks. Then we have a 15-ish minutes break, depending if the pizza thing is arriving after the last talk or before. This break can drastically change. We don't know yet, but we planned to have everything after the two talks, like more food and more snacks and that stuff. After the break, Julia is presenting. She's our headliner today, has her first presentation on modern design systems, also with Angular. After that, we will raffle something. We have a couple of prizes as always. We have JetBrains licenses. We have these cool t-shirts that you see occasionally here from our meetup. We also have hoodies today. And then there is open end. If you are still motivated and this year closes and lean coders kick us out, we can go to a pub close by and have more technical discussions that are very serious. Our sponsors for tonight are, as always, the Angular Austria Association. This is a non-profit association. They help us to finance Julia's flight, for example, from Poland and her hotel. Your food, your drinks is co-sponsored by Lean Coders, but in the past the association was also helping us there, and all the other small gears that you don't see are also driven by this association. Second sponsor, our all-time favorite sponsor, best sponsor of all time. I have to say that, but I don't get paid for it. Lean Coders. Maybe, Christoph, you want to give a quick 5 minutes pitch or? Flo can do that. Okay, Flo is here. He could like live pitch to you what it really means to be a Lean Coder. Whoa.
So professional. Yeah, it's. I'm really proud that we have been a partner for such a long time. And I'm happy that we have the new venue for the first time today in our new office. The last meetup was already very cozy, too little space. I'm happy that still so many people today, but it's enough. Not much to say. Whenever you are looking for a job, want to work on cool Angular projects or other projects on the TypeScript stack, drop us a note. We're always looking for talented people. And of course, we're also always looking for projects. So if you know clients. And yeah, that's it from my side. Enjoy the evening, enjoy the pizza, enjoy the beer. And whenever you have questions, come talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. I saw many pitches already from link coders, and I have to say every single pitch is different. Every single pitch has its own different style, and I love all of them. Heartwarming. Last sponsor, our pleasant company, Push-Based. I guess you know us already. We run that meetup here since 10 years, I believe. Very happy that we do that. Are also main sponsors. When nobody is here, we always cover everything that is left, sometimes more, sometimes less. And we also encourage people to do talks here. So we are not only sponsoring the meetup, we will also mentor you through your journey of giving your first talk or second talk until we hire you and then you show up on stage like Julian or Julia, because we did the same with them. Or is it a lie? No. No, you see. Okay, that was my pitch. The raffle contains the JetBrains license, these t-shirts and hoodies, plus something really special that is top secret. I wanted to share it already in the slides, but I was told to move it out of the slides, even it was in already. When we will raffle one or two very special things. Stay tuned, I cannot wait, like really. Now I'm so nervous about that stuff that I'm like, let's keep the talks and straight go to the raffle, but we cannot do that. Okay, enough of fluff talk. Now the real thing starts. Let me introduce to you the next slide. It's not the next slide about the next speaker. It is our call to you. We want to motivate you. Show up. Tell us what you want to share. We help you to present it. We help you to give your first talk. That would be really cool, because this is also not only sponsors, but also talks is an essential gear of every meetup, and we want your talk here on stage. Yay. Okay, now really, because the previous slide I didn't expect, but this one I expected, let me introduce Julian Jandl from Vienna, originally Germany. I was thinking a long time how I should pitch his introduction. In fact, this is a full freestyle bluff that I will do here, but I met Julian 5 years ago on a meetup, and today he's essential team member and major part of the success of the whole company, I would say. I have to say that, otherwise he doesn't help me anymore. But yeah, enough of the introduction. It is a performance-focused talk about a really nice open source library and technique. And without further delay, let's welcome on stage Julian Jandl.
Ring and remove the phone because it can ring. Perfect, so welcome everyone and welcome to my talk. cut my task into pieces. This is concurrent mode. So today's talk will be mostly about performance. As always, I like to talk about performance, and of course, this is an Angular meetup. I've prepared a demo in Angular, and I will show you some techniques that are applicable within Angular, but they should also be applicable for any other JavaScript-based front-end application. So, did you ever think about what happens when a user interacts with your application? So technically, what happens in the background? The browser, like before we want to cut something into pieces, let's first unravel what we want to cut into pieces, right? The browser will create a task for you. So a task is any discrete piece of work that the browser has to perform whenever you want to, for example, react to a click binding. And this is what's happening. Like you've seen the user here, he's clicking, so you want to react to any click binding here. So let's take a closer look at that. So the gray box on top you see here, this is the thing that the browser will produce as a task. The first row here in yellow, this will be the browser event or the user event that was kicked off and what you probably have a listener on, because otherwise there would not be any script execution, right? So you have a click listener in this case, and on the click listener, your application code, and this is the other color here, and note those colors when you inspect flame charts can be random, but from the color you can determine which scripts they belong to. So every blue color will be from the very same script JavaScript file, and every, for example, pink color would also be from the very same script source. But anyway, you have your application code here, and in this case we're executing first work, then other work. And you see on the x-axis, this is time progressing, and on the y-axis, you see the stack trace. So your method is work, and whatever is executed down here is happening within work. So you may choose to run Lodash or something in the background. So at this point, we maybe Lodash. And in the end, you have this purple and then the greenish colors that indicate actual browser work is going to happen, like rendering and paint stuff. There are not only tasks, but there are also long tasks. So a long task is any task that exceeds the limit of 50 milliseconds. So in this case, we have a 64 milliseconds task. So our blocking time, that's the red thing you can see here, so that one here, is considered to be 14.9 milliseconds because 14.9 milliseconds is the thing that we exceeded the 50 milliseconds threshold. And this is considered as blocking time added on top of your task. It looks scary, right? Because it's red. Red is always scary. But why should you actually care? Well, there is this very new metric introduced in, let me close this one here, introduced at the 12th of March in 2024, so not so long back ago. And this is a metric that indicates how fast is your application responding to your users' inputs. So whenever you click something, you scroll something, you drag something, you change an input of something, a new INP will get spawned. And INP, let me tell you something about this, is reckless. Because it's not only that you have to optimize something, you have to optimize everything. Because the worst ever interaction you have on your page will be counted as INP. So if you have 1,000 good interactions and one bad, the one bad will be your INP thing. That's crucial, it's reckless, but that's how it works. Technically, for very large enterprise applications and for thousands of interactions, the browser tends to strip out some of the outliers that are super high, like 20 seconds or something, and will erase it. But for most of the applications, it's true. The worst ever interaction for a user session will be your INP value. So it's very reckless, and you need to consider to improve that. So yeah, you have only 500 milliseconds in order to not be poor. 500 milliseconds is a blink of an eye. So let's dive into INP. INP is divided into 3 stages. We have input delay, so the time it takes for the browser to finally start processing what you actually want to process. Then you have the processing time, so in this case, the click. So you bound something to the click listener and you do some work. That's the processing time. And then you have presentation delay. So while processing something, you might added a class to something, or you changed styles for some elements. You added the DOM element, removed the DOM element, whatever. The browser has to restyle and recalculate your layout. So this is the presentation delay in the end. Before we go into a live demo about that, let me quickly introduce myself. Hi, my name is Julian. I'm performance engineer at the company Push-Based. Michael introduced it very well before. I'm also trainer and consultant, and for this talk, it's maybe more interesting that I'm also RX Angular core maintainer. So without further ado, let's go into a live demo about INP and long tasks. I did not meant to do that. I want to go back here because I can just switch to here, where we have this beautiful demo application where it currently says this is blank. Is it readable? Like, also this part is crucial for like the back rows. Otherwise I can just zoom in a little bit. Let's zoom in that one and also that one. Looks good. Good? Cool. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to navigate to the route that says native. Before I do that, I will not go here. I want to go to the performance panel and set my CPU throttling to 4 times, because then I can show you how it would work on a mobile device instead of this like very modern laptop. So let me go back to the console here. So I just click the native button here, and as you can see, it yells at me in dark red. It's poor. Web Vitals. This is, by the way, a Chrome extension you can install. It's called Core Web Vitals or Chrome Web Vitals, something like that. And it can give you outputs about any Web Vital in the console. So what has happened here? Let's dive into that. Should be back to the blank page now. Wait a second. Blank page again, full screen mode again. What I want to do here is show you one performance recording of that. Going to navigate over, stop the recording, enlarge it a little bit, and then let's take a look what's happening here on the main thread. We see here 1 second of one big task being executed. So this is what Angular does in the background for us. It ticks, quads detect changes, and then if we zoom in here, we see header work, sidebar work, content work, and this is essentially building up this whole layout here. So we have for the header, for the sidebar, for the content, and for the footer, one individual piece of work that needs to get executed at a single point in time, because you bootstrap the whole component, everything gets bootstrapped immediately, and we see a big hit on INP here. Again, if I open the console, we can see here this over 1 second point in time. So what options do we have now? We have this big script that gets executed at once. It takes over a second to compute. It's brutal, right? We are smart. We can schedule that thing away because we have a click binding, and then we say, okay, we move it away, make INP look great because we only spent a millisecond on the click, move the big work away from our click timer. What options do we have for scheduling? So there are timer APIs like set timeout or set interval. We can use request idle callback. We can use the message channel. This is maybe something new for many people. This is a channel you can use in order to communicate between tabs. So if you want to synchronize data between multiple browser tabs, you can use the message channel. It will also schedule things. You can use the animation frame or the new scheduler.postTask API. Whatever you use should be working. Because this is right now our INP, right? We have one single task that is a brutally long, 1 second long task for just this one click event listener. But I said we are smart, so we install a timer here. The click event is now, I don't know, a millisecond or so. We install a timer and then we let the long task run at a later point in time. And this is how we can achieve a very good INP metric at first glance. So let's take a look at how this looks. Let's first look at the code. So we have essentially here this A tag, where we have a click listener on, where it says nav to native scheduled. What are we doing here? We just use set timeout in this case, so a timer API, and then call our router, this router navigate to the scheduled route. Let's look at the application. And just as a reminder, I have still, this is why we have the exclamation mark here, the warning sign, I have still throttling enabled. So let's take a look at the console and click the scheduled button. We see here interaction 24 milliseconds. It's beautiful, right? Like our INP improved. We're geniuses. Let's take a look at the flame chart. Click it. Let's take a look here. We see here now in this interaction pane here on top, this tiny little pointer event here. This is our INP, 30 milliseconds. 30 milliseconds. And then we see our brutally long task here, 1 second, just executed at a later point in time. Okay, so yes, it works, but what does happen if a user clicks here in between? Like we have a new user input while we are executing this super long task, right? I have the feeling there's still like a huge elephant sitting within the room. So let's address it. First, let's explain it. Now, we are at the stage here where we have our blocking task. The new blocking task is now adding up to our input delay, because yes, the browser is aware a user wants to click, and you can like rage click as often as you want. The browser will be aware of it, but it cannot execute it because there's a blocking task. It's running here, and it cannot do anything about it. So you have this piece of input delay now added on top of your INP value. And then it can start process the click, and then it can start the rendering, and then you have your final new INP value. Why is that the case? In order to get an answer to that, let's dive into the JavaScript event loop. Just a little bit. Not a very deep dive, but let's explain it a little bit. So within the JavaScript VM, there's an endless loop going on. It's a while loop. It asks for give me tasks, and whenever I have a task, execute it away. So far, so good. What is this queue? The queue is the macro task queue. So what is a macro task? All of our timer APIs we have talked about before, so timer, idle callback, message channel, request animation frame, and essentially any other browser API, like resizing, input change, mouse down, mouse enter, mouse leave, whatnot, whatever you know from the browser that can emit an event will end up as a new macro task in the event loop. Also, of course, third-party extensions like Grammarly or 1Password or LastPass or whatever. For example, you click in an input box, your LastPass extension will then like render this tiny button and this dropdown for you. And this also runs on the same thread and will be also added as a task into your macro task queue. So yeah, let's take a look at that. And the model it has behind it is the run to completion model. So before any other task can be like tackled, starting to get executed, any before task needs to be fully done. Otherwise, it cannot start the next task. And this is the run to completion model. So let's go through it. We start with script evaluation. So our front end is now loaded. The user, in the meantime, clicked. So we added mouse down and a click event to our stack. On mouse down, we want to execute work and work 2. And again, on the y-axis, you see the call stack, and on the x-axis, you see the time passing. So we have to execute work and then work 2 here. Then the click happens. We take that from the stack now. Do something on click is being executed. Finally, we end up at the timer fired because someone had said set timeout 0 and then scheduled something in the future, and then we have timer fired. But yeah, the user wants to constantly interact with your page. What happens if something is getting executed here? Well, we run into a problem because, again, we will have input delay. Mouse on the slides. Yes, here. Again, we receive our input here, and then we have the input delay starting exactly here and adding up to your INP value, because INP is measured from that very moment in time and not any later. So yeah, INP is definitely impacted by bloating up your main thread with long tasks. So it's not just as simple as putting set timeout to any href link and schedule the thing away, because whatever happens being a long task will block anything else while it's being executed. So let's take a look how this is actually, and I did again the same error as before. Let's go back to the slides. Yes. So let's go back to our application here. Again, we are on the blank page. We still have a throttled device here. And I think it would be sufficient to just do a refresh, F5. Yes. So everything is refreshed. Now I will go. Perfect. To the scheduled page. Maybe I will add a little bit more throttling because then I can play around a little bit more. So 6 times throttling now. Open up the console again. I click the schedule button, and in the meantime, I'm just clicking randomly on the page. And this is what you see now. Need to point with the mouse. That was my initial interaction here. 1.2 seconds. It was also recorded as INP because this is the longest thing that happened. But all the other interactions here in between, 1000, 800, 700, 500, all of them were recorded because I was just clicking randomly on an empty space while the main thread was blocked by executing something else. And this is how you can also mess up your INP value, because something is going on in your application in the background. It's not rendering anything, it's just doing something. The user tries to interact with your page, even if it's a loading spinner and you try to build something big in the background, it will be recorded, it will be sent as INP to as a metric. So the best goal is to not have so long tasks, right? So question is, what to do with our long tasks then? So my friend Kirill proposed a nice little game. Maybe some people of you know that back then from the Game Boy times, where you played this nice little game where you could just like destroy your flame charts like this. But unfortunately, it's not working out like that. So I've come up with 3 different ways on how to improve your long tasks. First thing, most preferred solution whatsoever, and one wise man, I think it was Paul Lewis, said once, performance is the art to avoid work. So reduce whatever you're doing, like reconsider what you are scripting there, and if it's not needed, remove it. That's the best thing you can do in any case, especially for slower end devices. Most of you in your working environment, you are working with like MacBook M3 Max or whatever. It will compute anything away. You will never notice any JavaScript bottleneck because your machine is so highly powered. Throttle your device down and see how it behaves then. And then you know how people on mobile devices will see your application actually working. But yeah, it's the preferred solution. It's very high effort. Sometimes it's not even possible because like work has to be done. So what other options do you have? You can distribute your work. So chunk it down into smaller pieces, distribute it on the main thread, give the browser time in between to interact with users. And then in the end, if you have distributed it, you want to also prioritize it because like some things are more important than other things. Sending data to the index DB is maybe less important than displaying the new pop-up on the screen for users. And that's where I need to introduce you to RX Angular Concurrent Mode. This is what the talk is all about. So we have 4 conceptual building blocks here. The first three are targeting the distribution part. The last one is targeting the prioritization part. First thing is scheduling. We learned already about that. We can schedule things like tell the browser, do something in the future, but not now. First render stuff and then do something. Second part is chunk it into slices and then execute them bit by bit. Then you want to control the size of the chunks because it should not be random, right? You want to be aware of what frame budget you want to target and how big of the chunks you are that you are slicing up because it creates overhead. And then finally, we have prioritization because some chunks are more important than the others. So we want to move it around on the main thread. So scheduling, the first technique, we've already talked about that. You use one of the scheduling techniques to install any scheduler, move your work away from the actual interaction. Then the next thing is chunking. So yeah, we have this big click event listener. Why can't we just split it apart into 3 pieces and render them bit by bit? None of them are long tasks now. And for every task, we have time here in between. Time here in between to interact with the application again. So yeah, user can react to input. The browser can react to input. So consider the following setup, that what you've seen before in the before 2 demos. So we have 4 components being rendered here: a header, a sidebar, a footer, and a body. So now we want to apply chunking to this. We have seen before in the flame charts, we have header work, we have sidebar work, body work, and footer work. So why not just slice it just here? It would make sense. And just then chain them together. It's super easy right now because you can just import this nice little neat directive, which is called rxlet from the RxAngular template package. And instead of rendering all the components at once, you just use the structural directive rxlet with an empty input whatsoever. This is just for demo purposes. In real world, you would obviously bind some reactive state to it, but for now, for the demo purpose, just give it an empty input. It will also do the job. We can also do the same for lists. So lists are anyway the most big problem for applications, rendering hundreds of components at once. You don't need to render them at once. You mostly need to render like a tiny proportion of it at once. So yeah, whenever you render lists, you have item, 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 item until the whole list is depleted, and then yeah, the browser has to paint and render all of it. But you can use rx4 from the RxAngular template package. So instead of using ng4, you just use rx4, and what it does for you, it slices the item templates into tinier pieces, rendering them bit by bit. But it's not dumb by any means. It's a little bit smarter, and you can configure how it works in the background because it's not creating one task for each individual view. It wouldn't make sense because sometimes you have like very simple list items that don't require much work and would create too much overhead to render every one of them in a single chunk. So you just define a frame budget where you say how many views should be rendered together in one chunk until I start creating a new chunk for you. So by default, it's configured for 60 FPS. How does the algorithm work in the background? So it executes one view, measures the time, sees, okay, I have still time left. I didn't hit the threshold. Give me the next view. Give me the next view. And now it notices, okay, I exceeded the threshold, and now I need to spawn a new task. So now I pause whatever I was doing, give the browser back time, and then I restart the queue with whatever task is being left. So this is how the implementation, like in a very simple way, looks like in the background. Whenever you have a task, and while the runtime is still lower than the threshold we have defined by the frame budget, give me the next task, execute it, and add the time it took on top of the runtime, and then repeat. So let's take a look at how this is looking like. Again, I'm so used to closing the browser. Before we dive into the code, into the application, let's first dive into the code. So I have my concurrent component here. So maybe let's start with a native one. So yeah, that would be the native implementation. We have header bar component, sidebar component, main content component with an ng4 rendering list items, and then a footer bar. If we go to the concurrent implementation, we have now rxlet for the header, rxlet for the sidebar, rxlet also added to the main content, and then for the footer. Let's see how this is behaving. So I go back to the blank page, I close that, maybe I do a refresh so that we can see a fresh INP value. So I click to concurrent now. And you can see this is 6 times throttling. We have INP of 104 milliseconds, and you could visually tell that the pieces were added bit by bit by bit by bit to our application here. I also told you that we can do that for list items. So let's quickly dive into the flame charts here. Take a look at how this is looking like, concurrent. Open this up a little bit more. And there you can see all the chunks are executed bit by bit. So first chunk should be header bar. We can scroll down and take a look at if this is true. It says header work here. Then we have sidebar work. Then we have content work. And in content work, this is something I wanted to show you. This is added on top because here we render our list templates. So we have content work here. And content also includes the list of items. And I told you we can improve even that. So let's go back to the code, and instead of ng4, we use rx4 here. Save it. Go back to the blank page, go back to concurrent, and now you could see that all of the items here were added bit by bit by bit. Now we have 100 items. We can also see that in the flame charts. Remember this view here, where all of the items are rendered here at once. Go back to the blank page, start the recording, go back to concurrent. There you could see all the items are added in. And now, if it lets me zoom in a little bit or scroll, yes, perfect. We see now the content part, which is this one, has not only content, but no list creation on top of it, because the list creation happens, as you can tell, here. So list items are here, generated bit by bit, and as you can see here you now see the frame, the FPS configured. So 90 milliseconds, 11 milliseconds, 20 milliseconds, 90 milliseconds. So it tries to really do the best it can to fit into that frame budget. So executing tasks bit by bit by bit. Okay. Last thing I want to discuss here is the priority. So before, or right now, we executed first header bar, then sidebar, then body, then footer. But the most important part of your page will be body, for sure. So what you actually want to do is move body from the third place here to the first place. So you want to change priority here, regardless of the way how you define it in DOM, because this is how it works naturally, right? So the way you define it in DOM, that's the prioritization you get. But you can also configure that. That's what you want to do here. So there are 5 different priorities. It's a little bit more than just a number, but I won't cover everything here. So right now we treat it just a name is according to a number. So immediate would be highest priority, do it immediate. It's still scheduled, but it's the first thing that's getting executed. Then you have user blocking, priority 1. Normal, this is the default behavior. Then low, then idle for something that should run in the background, like it's like for example background IndexedDB updates or something like that. So how can you do that? It's possible to define the strategy just by an input. So for example here for the header we say please render it in strategy low. And the body with immediate, because this is the thing we want to render as the first thing we want to render. And then the footer, also low. You can also put it to idle, for example. This is just an idea. There are multiple ways how to achieve that goal. So yeah, let's take a look at that. First, let's take a look at the code. So this was the example from before. We have just assigned all the let directives and for directives here without any strategy. So if I switch back now to concurrent priority mode, we will see here header bar is now assigned to strategy low, and the main content is now assigned to strategy immediate, and the footer is assigned to strategy low. So with that in place, I can again go here from our blank page to prioritize. And then you see content is the first thing that's added into the DOM, and not header bar. That's header bar, then sidebar, then content, then footer. And now to prioritize one, content first, then sidebar, then header bar, then footer, whatever you want. But you can define when things are getting executed. So with that, I'd like to wrap up my talk for today. And if you like the RX Angular library, please leave a like and star us on GitHub. Also, I mentioned my good friend and colleague, Kirill, before. He wrote a masterpiece, like seriously a masterpiece. You have to read it. You cannot click the link, I know, but you will get another link on the next slide. Make sure to read this thing. It will give so much more introduction to INP in general and to the JavaScript event loop. So again, my name is Julian Jandl, performance engineer at the company Pushbased, also trainer consultant. Book us if you love us. Of course you love us. Thank you for your precious time. Slides repository.
The slogan is book us because you love us. Maybe this. I have a, actually, I'm not sure what the English word is. I call it a pancake flip. So this is a pancake flip, and on the top of my pancake flip, I don't know if it's really a real word, but I know that word here. It's called microphone. So if you also understand what a microphone is, and you have a question, I will put that a little bit in front of your face. You speak into it, and then the audience, remote audience, will also hear you. Or first, second, third. Shoot.
Perfect. Thank you so much for such an interesting talk. I find it very interesting because I also develop in Angular applications and have some performance issues sometimes. I have two questions. First, does this way of creating applications compromises other metrics such as CLS? Yeah, and the second question I have is how does this RX-let directive behave with SSR, and does it do something with the content we receive from HTML? Does it even work? And I just have a third question. And if you do the
Write it down.
I can repeat probably. Yeah, the first one was about the CLS SSR, and the third one, if you are developing an SPA, would you rather use new defer feature from Angular rather than RX-let directive? Thank you.
Super cool. Like all three of them are great. Let's talk first about CLS. Yes, can be an issue, definitely. Like you need to be aware of your layout. Oh yeah, of course. CLS is another core web vital. It's the abbreviation for cumulative layout shifts. So whenever you insert a new DOM element to your page and it shifts away other content, then the browser will recognize this as a layout shift. And the more you do it, all of them add up. Like you bootstrap your application, then you add different contents until it's stable. All of them will add up, and you get a score out of it, and that's the CLS score. So how much elements shifted around. And yes, this technique can cause problems in that area if you do not care about your layout, because it would not cause in my demo application, because this is a predefined grid. So everything that enters the DOM cannot shift anything around because they enter the DOM in a predefined grid layout. There are techniques to work around that issue. For example, you want to render a list with 100 items. You know how large those items will be. So you can just pre-assign the height value for the container and then render the items within them, like bit by bit, without letting the container grow over time and shifting other elements to the bottom. So this is, but yes, definitely. If you overdo it, and if you do it like everywhere on your page, you can run into problems. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that was for CLS.
Yeah.
SSR. SSR, like you can configure the strategy how the directive works behind the scenes to be native. That would behave like async pipe in the background. So for SSR, you can just configure the strategy to be native, then no problem at all.
Okay.
Then third question, I forgot about already.
Would you rather use a new defer feature?
Deferred versus let, yes. Hard topic, we could discuss, I guess, the whole evening about it. It has a super neat, nice feature for bootstrapping because it lets you define a placeholder component that should always be visible, regardless of if your component was already loaded or not. So whenever you enter a page and you have a big list component, it will first render the placeholder. So in this case, it behaves kind of similar like RxLet directed diff. It also brings you the benefit of INP on Bootstrap, but not on update, because there's no change anymore. After the component, like after defer did its job and let the component you wanted to defer enter the view, it's there. Then whatever update passes by, it won't pass the let directive, so it won't be added to the queue. So yeah.
So they can probably play together, like you can defer the component and then
use our RxLet within.
RxLet,
yes, definitely.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for all the questions. A bless.
Great talk, very clear.
Thank you.
So I've got a question about, you mentioned these different ways of scheduling tasks in one of your earlier slides. What's Rx Angular using out of those things?
The weirdest of all. Let me go back here. No. But it was a similar looking one. No. That one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's using the message channel.
Okay. Is that
So
the same?
the weirdest of all possible solutions.
Is that the same one? Is that the same as the post message API?
It was developed to like as kind of a polyfill for the post task before it was actually a thing.
Okay.
How it ended up being, like it's not our invention, the concurrent mode, and I forgot to give credits, by the way, so I need to give credits now to the React team. So the React team has implemented this concurrent mode, and we essentially took their scheduler, built ngZone inside of it, and then released it as Rx Angular concurrent mode.
Okay.
So this, so this is how it's working in the background. We are using the React scheduler, and the React scheduler is using message channel.
I see. Good. I've also got one other question, but only one more.
What
That's
is
all
going on here?
Hey.
I hear myself
there
here.
you are. I'll wait till you're ready to receive the question.
No.
Okay. So you mentioned these tasks are macro tasks.
Yes.
Right? And there's a micro task.
Yes.
Isn't what how does that fit in with this at all, or is it just not relevant?
I mean, it fits kind of in. It is also something to be asynchronous and to also schedule something. But a micro task, like every macro task has its own queue attached to it, which is the micro task queue.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you create a micro task from within any macro task, it will be also executed within the same task.
Okay.
You cannot spawn out of your macro task with a micro task.
Right.
And that's why it's also fitting into the event loop. It's an important thing to know, but it wasn't mandatory to explain for like this technique. That's why I didn't put it in. But if I would, for example, just to complete this question, maybe if I would, for example, go here into my app component, here into the set timeout, and I would to create a micro task promise.resolve, then and execute my code here in the promise, it would be still part of the macro task created by this timer.
Right.
Always. There's no like way out of it.
And the browser can't do any rendering or anything before.
No.
Okay.
That's the thing that the browser gives you as an advantage, right? So you can do asynchronous work, but still rely on the fact that your browser did not change in between. So you have same store position, all the elements are still in the same position, nothing had changed, nothing could get rendered. And this is like how micro tasks fit into that.
Cool, thank you.
Next one was here, I believe. Thanks. First of all, who wants pancakes? And second of all, you explained about different strategies, different priority strategies. What's the default one, and what's the difference between them, except maybe unless they're very trivial?
Yeah, that would go into a lot of detail, but let's open the slide here. So yeah, 5 different strategies. Also, we didn't invent them. It's like the naming plus the implementation comes from the React implementation, from the React scheduler they have in place. Interesting enough, before they even started like releasing that, we just released everything, and they and they like reverted back, so they do not even have the concept of strategies, and now we have to deal with it. So this is because I guess the reasoning behind was it's like so much complexity hidden behind it. It's not just the number. Yes, the default one is normal. So you still have always the opportunity to put something before and after. You can configure the default behavior via a configuration globally or on a provider basis, provider basis. There's a little bit more to it, because user blocking tasks, for example, can only stay within the queue for 250 milliseconds. When they are longer in the queue, they immediately get exhausted. Normal tasks can stay in the queue for 5 seconds. When they stay longer in the queue, they will get immediately executed. Idle tasks, on the other hand, can stay forever in the queue. So there's the possibility of them never getting executed at all. It's not like practical, but theoretically possible. But this is the other concept lying behind that. They have a deadline, how long they could survive in the queue. So they cannot just get re-added and added and added in the end. So at some point in time, if you render 100,000 views with a normal strategy, like after view 10,000, it stops chunking and just exhausts everything. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Catalina Alexandru. I want to ask you, if you have to load from the backend a long list, how we will manage this just to not put the user to wait too much? We have how to manage this?
I mean, there are multiple techniques. The simplest one, without too many compromises, would probably be just
to use virtual lists? Or
yeah, virtualization is a totally different story. For the first thing, at least part of this talk here, you could just use RX4. That would at least help the burden of like rendering everything at once, because it will like split the views apart and render them bits by bit. But of course, if you have like a super large list, and as I said before, there's a deadline. If you render 1,000 views, then 1,001 and the rest of 10,000 will be just added as one blocking long task. So if you want to avoid that, yes, go for virtualization. Like we have also a package for virtualization in place, which competes to the CDK virtual scrolling, but you could just try out both.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you too.
Okay.
All right, hi. So in terms of the priority we were talking about, I noticed in your last demo that you had the content as highest priority or immediate. So it loaded content, then sidebar, and then it started loading what was inside
The list items, yes.
the list. How can you go like granular and say like, I don't want to load this list yet, I want to finish loading everything else? And
Yeah, I mean,
how does it behave in terms of priority? Can you set priority on the
yes,
there-
priority.
there-
So if we go to the current priority list. So yeah, this one gets assigned low strategy. This one gets assigned immediate strategy. So main content would be treated as the first view, but then you render again lists with items with RX4, which also requires you to specify a strategy, or it uses normal. So by this order, what this would mean, sidebar first, because this is the
so sidebar is normal because
sidebar is normal because you don't assign anything, and also RX4 is normal because you don't assign anything. Of course, I could go now here and say strategy user blocking, for example, to change the strategy of this one as well.
So then there would be like main content, then the four. And
yes,
okay.
exactly. So this is how you would then, yes, it would be, let's try it out before I just say yes and it's not the case. But yes, content and then item list. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So then if they have the same priority, then it falls back to how they are in
Yes, definitely. It's like order on which you queue and then priority, and then they swap order in case there are different priorities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
This is a question. The first question is, if I have like, I want to render obviously above the fold, what's also my main content, do I have to define that in the layout? Also when I create them? And second question is, if I have like, for example, a desktop and a mobile layout, do I have to specify different values for these two things that they get rendered? And the third question would actually be, if I navigate away, is the macro tests, are they all cancelled?
Yes. Okay. Let's answer the third question first, and let's take a look at just this app here. And in the middle of the process, I just navigate back, right? Before the footer has, or any other view could actually be rendered. I go here to concurrent mode, to concurrent prioritized, and before I could render the rest of the view, I just navigated back. So yes, of course, everything that was part of the queue is now gone. Like no work is executed in the background anymore. It's just removed from the queue. Then about the mobile and desktop, you don't need to change configurations between them. It should work just out of the box as it is. You can though, if you know on mobile you have things that should be higher prioritized than on desktop, then why not? Feel free to do that. It's
and the use case would be that I have a menu which is visible on desktop, and on mobile it's in a sidebar which is not rendered at all. So I don't need to.
Exactly. So then in best case, on mobile you have a very low strategy for that. And for things that are hidden below the fold, at least you do not run into the issue that CLS is counted, because CLS is only counted for things that are visible to the user. So if something is shifting around at the footer of your page and you do not even see it, then no one cares.
Okay, good. Thank you.
More questions?
You have a simple one. Okay. You know, it's so exhausting to think. Let's do more.
Yeah, it's very simple question. Is this cross-tab messaging working on all browsers everywhere?
What is it?
This cross-tab
Yeah.
messaging is
Yeah.
working everywhere on all browsers?
No, this is native. It's a native API, browser API, message channel.
So also on Microsoft Edge.
Yes, of course. Like every JavaScript, I think all of them support it. Message channels, yeah.
Okay, that was the question. Thank
Browser
you.
API, yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is about set timeout. Do you believe it's a good practice to use it in Angular, or are there some other options to make it?
It depends. I like to say no. I would not recommend using it. Especially like after V18, things might look different because ngZone is then not a thing anymore. But right now, you most probably stress your application more than you want by using set timeout. But this is just because of the nature of Angular. It's not applicable for any other framework, because set timeout will trigger ngZone, ngZone will trigger change detection again, and most of the time you don't want that.
Okay, thanks.
Nice.
When you have long-running, low-priority tasks and it appears a new immediate task, is it ranked at top of the task?
So, if you have two tasks in the queue and you add a new one that has a higher priority, then of course the one with the higher priority will get executed first. But if there is something already in execution, you cannot stop it anymore. Okay. It's impossible. Something that has started has to end. And this is the run to completion model that I tried to explain before, because this is how like the browser is working. It only has this one line of execution, and when it starts, it has to end. You cannot do anything in between. Yeah, I mean, it brings a lot of benefits, but also problems, as always.
Can you go back to the browser maybe?
Yeah.
So here, when you went from the concurrent one to the blank one, it loaded instantly back to the blank one, right? So if you would go from the native one back to the back,
yeah, then it's stuck. And you could tell here from here you see the INP values. Like if I go to native and then try to go back, yeah, it's of course it's blocked.
Okay.
Like I go to native and I have to wait until native is here. Otherwise, yeah, nothing can be processed.
But if you go to the scheduled now and press quickly to the blank, it will go.
Also, same behavior. You can see it here. Wait, I will clean the whole console. So I go to scheduled and immediately try to go back to native, to blank. Yeah. You see now only blank, but this is what happened in between. This is all my clicks being recorded, but they could not be processed because I have this one big task being executed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. Do you know that in GitLab, for instance, when you have a lot of changes in the code and you check the difference, so when you try to close all the files, like the accordion closes, and usually if it's like a lot of files with a lot of changes, it might take up to a minute to close all of this stuff.
I know, and this is also happening on GitHub.
Okay, yeah, probably. And is there any way Rx Angular can help us with it if we would build the same?
Yes, of course. Like this is like the prime, that would be prime example for using it there. Because what they try to do is, again, trying to collapse 1,000 DOM elements at once. But why? Like you don't even see, you don't even see all of them. You can just render them bit by bit.
So RxLet will help me with that, or maybe.
This is like depending on the implementation detail here. But yes, either RX4 or RxLet, or combination of both, or any other internal services. Like it didn't cover all of the APIs.
Okay, thank you.
I will do one last question, then I would say we close this session here, make a small break, and take some refreshments. My last question, wouldn't, like we care all about INP and good INP, wouldn't it like fix all of our problems if we just don't interact with the page at all?
Yes.
Thank you. Then have a nice break and see you later. on purpose. 30 seconds. I guess we can start. Welcome back from the break. Normally we do a small poll, how you like the break, how you like the food. It takes 20 minutes. Today we skipped that because more important stuff to do. What more important, you will ask yourself, and I can tell you in the next slide. Our next talk is more important than anything else in general, but especially today. And as always, I'm fully prepared for the introduction. So today, second talk, I will introduce Julia Rapczynska. She told me that multiple times how to pronounce it, and I have a long history with bad pronunciation of last names, so I did my best. Was it good? Thank you. Julia comes straight from Poland, but originally she's from Ukraine. And today, no, we need more information. And how we met. And how we met. That's always a good intro, how we met. Julia, do you remember how we met? It was a wonderful workshop in Poland, and I came in and I did my setup and I tried to get my computer running, and she's sitting in the first row and started to correct me constantly and was telling me what I should do and what I should not do, and a couple of months later now she works at our company. That's how you do it. And if you want to get more of her performance, I would say we can start now with the talk. Applaus.
With the poll, before we do this, I have a question. How did you get the info on the meetup that we are having here today? LinkedIn, Twitter, Meetup. Okay, let's raise your hands. LinkedIn, up. Okay, Meetup, scrolling for something to do because you're a loner. Okay, a lot of people. Okay, Twitter here. Okay, one person. That's a dying platform. Okay, we checked it. Good. So Michael already did the introduction, and I think I proved myself recently that I do like to correct people. But once again, my name is Julia Rapczynska. I'm a software developer at Pushbase. I'm doing a little bit training as well, and started presenting the ways for people to ease their lives, especially as developers, because I don't like to repeat myself. I don't like to copy things, especially when it comes to the known code thing, because it's not fun. So I will teach you today how to avoid this as well. But first of all, before we start, please raise your drink this time, not the hand. The ones who are doing something with the Figma or Sketch, or copying the styles from the places, or you have done it before when you have a design that you need to turn into the code. Don't be shy, we all do it. If you don't have a drink, you can raise your hand, that's fine. Okay, so you see that a lot of us. So I'll be teaching you how to avoid copy-pasting and the applications when it comes to doing this part of work by explaining how the design system works. And we will start with the what question. So what is design system? So basically, when we look at the design system in terms of the theory, in theory, it's a set of tools, rules, and processes that help us to turn the coding experience and the creation of the application, starting from the design and then bringing it into the Angular in our case. In practice, when we talk about the design system, it's a pre-built component library with the small pieces that you use and combine the code and the design in order to create your application. So when you think of it, you have the Lego bricks, and when you compare it to creating the app, you have the predefined set of Lego bricks that you can align any way you want in order to either create something small or you can create this unicorn on the steroids. So basically you have the working design and the components here, and you can use it in order to build whatever you want. So when it comes to the design system, I think that the first thing that comes to your mind would be Angular material, of course, but then you have the different set of libraries. You have PrimeNG, you have Taiga UI, you have Candy UI, and the different set that you have already worked with, definitely. But often when it comes to maintaining the design system, at some point, we come to the question when to get to this understanding of the design system. This is pretty simple. We have two cases here. The first case, if you're lucky, of course, you have this greenfield project. You start from the very beginning. You're thinking about how to create the architecture of your application. And you're starting to think like, what could be those small pieces that you can put in place in order to reuse them throughout the applications. And the unfortunate scenario often is you land somewhere there and you understand that sometimes if you need to change the light bubble somewhere inside this tangled piece, it's very hard to maintain. So you go to the very beginning and think, what could I have done differently in order to make my application easier to be maintained and develop in the future. When we talk about the application architecture in general, doesn't matter when you start, if you start from the very beginning of the greenfield project, as well as you're somewhere in the very hard to maintain and advanced stage of the application, you can think of the pieces that you have there as the atomic design approach. So basically you start with the atoms of your application, and when we talk about the components, atom here would be the smallest piece that you cannot break down, and the one that would be reused everywhere basically in order to build something bigger, like the bigger blocks of your interface. Then we have molecules. Molecules, of course, are the collections of the atoms that you glue together to still create relatively simple UI components. So basically, those two would be your DOM components that you use in order to create some pieces of the UI interface. Then we have the organism, and the organisms are already relatively complex components that hold sometimes a piece of business logic. So if you think of the organism comparing to what you had before, you can think of the header component in your application, right? Header consists of the small pieces, like the buttons, the input sometimes. You can have a logo, you can have some icon there, but still dependent, for example, on the state of your header, whether you're a logged user or you're a non-logged user, you have some of the logics going on behind. So it's already not that dumb of the component. Then we have a template, and templates are basically the way to place your components within a layout. So if you think about it, basically you like break your page of the application into smaller pieces, especially the reusable ones, like the layout of your app. So you would put the header, you would put a footer, and you would project some content inside of it, but the header and footer would always be there. And then we have a page, of course, which contains all the content that you put into the template, as well as the business logics, and basically that is all that you get at the very end of the development process. So when we talk about the design system, we are pretty clear here that when it comes to what to put into this library of reusable components, you can agree with me that you would put the atoms and the molecules because, as we said, they are the DOM components, so it's easy to reuse them throughout the application. And then you would have the application where you put the whole pages and the templates because they are strictly related to the business logics. But when it comes to the organism, that would be this poor Travolta not knowing where to go. So when it comes to the organism, take into account the fact that it contains a little bit of the business logic already, but it's still pretty basic. You need to be smart when it comes to putting it either into the one place or another place. And we know what we want to put into the design system and what it consists of, but how do we do it? Who is aware of Storybook here? Okay, multiple people. Good. So we can agree that the Storybook as a tool that allows us to develop the components in the isolation would be a perfect way to start with. It doesn't matter if you're starting from the very scratch or you are developing the components on the side while having already existing application. The design system basically is very component-centric, right? So you focus only on one small piece of the functionality, and from there you go to trying to make it as flexible and as possible in order to use it somewhere else in the app or in the template. And Storybook would be a perfect way to do so because we focus on one component. We have few states of the component for it in order to fulfill the requirements, like the business requirements or the design requirements of the application. And we can play with this component, test it against different browsers, different viewports, and also check it when it comes to the accessibility. So we can cover the visual test and the reusability of the components and focus only on one piece. And what it brings us in terms of the design system and this component-centric environment, we have a threefold here. Basically, we have the isolated development environment, we have the interactive playground for our components, as well as we have the documentation for the components. So when it comes to the isolated development environment, think of when you want to create some new component or you want to test an existing one, how much time sometimes it takes you to fake the state or to mock some of your service responses or to just do the conditionals which will either render or not render the component on a particular page. I mean, I know that you might be lucky and when you start from scratch, you can just inject and start coding from app components and just put anything you want there. But if you're already in a very developed state, it's a bit hard to do so. So this isolated environment would be a perfect way because we just focus on one piece. And when it comes to only one piece there, if you talk about the button components, the entrance fee is very small because in order to see how your button would work, you just need a couple of lines of code and you're good to go, right? So you would have your button there displayed in the obvious primary state, and when you're doing the developments, you can go to Storybook and just see how this component will end up on the production. It also works as an interactive playground. So we can, when we already have this component, we can manipulate with this component in the real time without changing the code. And we can see how this component will behave later on the production in the real life application. So when it comes to the interface of Storybook, what we can do, we have a lot of set of add-ons. So if you want to see how our components will be styled when it comes to different theming, we can click there and check how it's going to look for the different theme. And we have the controls which allow us to basically do those manipulations with the different states of the component without, once again, running the app, setting up the backend for it, or mocking any kind of services and basically faking it until we get the desired state of the component. We can also test the component when it comes to the basic interactions. So we talk about the DOM components here. And we know that they should not be responsible for handling the business logic, but still, if you're talking about something simple like a drop down a button or input, we still need to make sure that they don't only look nice, but they need to do something, right? So we can fake here, not fake, but trigger the user interactions and check that the button will be reacting on the click, or the input will change the input when the user does something and provides some kind of text there. And when running the test, you can not only do it as a part of your CI pipeline, but when you work with the Storybook from the UI interface, you would still see that your component does have some interactions and does have some actions, so it reacts on what's going on there. And the last piece here, when it comes to the trifold of Storybook, we all like to go to the good written documentation when it comes to, once again, well-known design systems like the Angular Material or PrimeNG, and we can see how the API looks there, what are the different states of the component, what are the different variants, sizes, and so on and so forth. So Storybook will also work here as a single source of truth when it comes to the docs. So basically, you can just create a documentation for every single component by inserting any state of the component you want. You can describe the basic API, also the usages, any directives when it comes to applying these components, any states like disabled, flags, and so on and so forth. So this would also act as the source of truth for your design system. So we know already how we would code the component, basically what are the ways for us to implement them and to create a good architecture. But when we look at the components that we do, we anyway land into this circle of styling the component. And here you can see as a simple example, you would say, like the button, but when it comes to styling the button, you have a lot. It's like, seems like a very simple molecule if you go back to the atomic design, but we have some paddings, we have the font sizes, we have the borders, we have the icons there, a lot of coloring and so on and so forth. So you still need to maintain it in order to make sure that when this component is being reused throughout the application, it looks the way it should look and cover all the possible variants and states and business needs. And how we do it, as we already said, often we get a design, we go to Figma, we look at the right-hand side here, and basically we copy different CSS properties and apply them to the component. And we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And usually it's not fun because you end up doing a lot of copy pasting when it comes to creating those components. And it doesn't matter which kind of stage of the development we are working on now. We can talk about the simple component, and we're talking about some more advanced pages or the layouts that you do there, but you basically end up doing the very same. If you have a pet project, you might use some pro bono free design from Sketch that you found somewhere on the internet, and you would still do the same thing. So is there basically a way to make this process a little bit more pleasant from the developer perspective and reduce this copy-pasting pattern? Luckily, there is. When it comes to the design system, we can use the design token, which basically acts as a single source of truth. When it comes to design versus development, it acts as a communication tool here. So it builds a bridge between the design and the code in order to make sure that the user interface that we build has this seamless experience, and it also makes it easier for us to do the development without like maintaining this copy-paste pattern. So you can say that like it's a language unit that we use in the design system in order to make the coding experience easier. Why we use the design tokens in this approach? So if you think about your application, you will take, I don't know, let's say that you have some sales platform, and you have the apps, like you have a monorepo, and you have the app, you have the buyer, you have the seller, you have the admin app, and you have your design system, like the component library there. So you have multiple applications, and sometimes those applications can be for the native apps, sometimes you have them for the web apps, and they still need to look the same, and at the same time have some differences when it comes to the buyer versus seller versus admin, right? So here, the good thing about the design tokens is that they are platform agnostic. So no matter where you want to use those tokens, they could be applied to any kind of application and any kind of platform that you use. So when it comes to the structure of the design tokens, we can start with a very simple one. I'm pretty sure that many of you do define the variables, like with the colors and paddings, right? Anything related to the spacing and the coloring, in order to try not to repeat yourself, and you end up having like a primary color, you end up having like, I don't know, green 100, you end up having like, I don't know, some hot pink color there. So it's like a very beginning when it comes to creating the design system. So basically you have the raw data associated with that variable, so with that platform, and then you have the specific value defined to be reused throughout the application, and then you have your button that you apply this data to. This is okay. But what if you have the application where you have the hot pink color defined, then you have the primary pink and the primary color? Which one would be the primary color, which one would be the hot pink, and which one would be the primary pink here? So when we are talking about the design system tokens, the good approach here is to use a little bit of more of layers of the abstractions when it comes to defining those tokens. So once again, the first thing that we have is the raw data. So we have the hex color here. Then we have the lower level token, which is a private value that we don't usually use in order to style the components. We just have it as a defined vocabulary for the raw values that we use in order to style. And then we have the alias tokens, which give a little bit of more meaning when it comes to the variables that we defined in the first step. So if you talk about this particular case, we have the hot pink color defined here, and then we have the alias token, which points to the hot pink color, and in case of our application, it acts like a primary color. And based on that, we create the component token, which is a variable that pretty clear says that in case of the active button background, we point to the primary color. So we still have like this clear understanding what the component token does, at the same time pointing to the abstract color, which in case of the developer doesn't really need to mean which actually color we want to point to. So in this case, we have the hot pink. In the next theme or the next product, we can have the green color. And maybe let's look at some example here. So let's say that we have the simple app we want to build in order to announce the Angular events that are coming this year. And we have the application. And we have the application that has a few themes. So we have the color differentiations when it comes to a couple of components and the header here. So when it comes to the button, how should the button know which is the primary color right now? So when we look at the source code here, we know that we have, just a sec.
Can you zoom in?
Yeah. Okay, so we have a set of tokens that we use in order to style the components. So we know that we have a red color now used in this theme, and if we look at the source code of the button component here, we know that the button is using the sorry. Okay. So we know that we style the button component, and we're talking here about the border or the background color. So we have the component token that is pointing to the alias token here. But in terms of changing the theme, when I switch from red to green, we can see that the token values for the alias token have changed. So we are pointing to a different global token now. We are pointing to a greenish theme. But when it comes to creating and styling the components here, we have no change, right? We still use the component token, which points to some abstract alias. But at the same time, when it comes to reusing those color and aliases pointing from one level to the lower level, we know that the abstraction is still there. So from the developer perspective here, we don't make any change if the new theme is coming up to the application, or there is a change when it comes to the primary color or the background color of the button. It will be just pointing to a different token. But when it comes to the code of the button component here, no change was made. So we still remain with this level of abstraction here. So we talk about the design tokens, and we talk about having Figma on one side as one player of the design system, and then we saw that we have the tokens defined, and somehow we need to get them to the application. And when it comes to doing it manually, if you look at how much things is going on here, you can say that it's a lot, because you still have to maintain those files with all the themes. You still have all of those colors. And if there is any kind of change, you would have to go here to one level, check which variable it points to on the lower level, and somewhere there you would find your way to this radius that you need to change in order to make your button work. It looks like too much, but luckily there is a way to change it. So we have a few ways to automate the design system to work for us instead of doing this once again copy and pasting and maintaining the design tokens. The first thing that you can do when it comes to using Figma as an example of the design solution here, when there is a variable defined there which later on lands as the design token in Figma, what we can do is basically we can use the Figma API to pull those variables from those to pull those design tokens. From those design tokens, we can convert them into any preprocessor variables that you use, and then use them in the application to style your components. So basically, what you would get as a result, you can get all the layers of the tokens there. So you will get the let's say you will get the file with the global tokens that you provide in the root. Then you would get the theme for each of the layers there. So you would have the alias tokens for your red brand, yellow brand, green brand, or any kind of theme. It would also work if you talk about this light mode versus dark mode, but then you have in the application. And then you would get the component level tokens that you basically use in order to style your components. So you would split it, let's say, into the mixins depending on the component. You would include that mixin in the component styling, and then basically you would use only this handful of the tokens in order to style your components depending on the pseudo state, of course. Then you would have the different set of tokens provided. And then once again, if you have to change something in the styling, if you use this automation which pulls the tokens automatically, and let's say that the red theme is pointing now from the green theme here, since I clicked on this one, it's pointing from one shade of green to another shade of green, you would have to do basically nothing, because this tokens layering would do the work for you. So you would still, from the perspective of the component, stick with this token here, and all the pointing which is done from one level to another would be done by Figma. So this is a simple way to go. The other way around is to do a little bit more of the advanced scenario, because in the previous case here, we would still need to go to the repository, and before we do some changes, just as a double check, as we do usually when we are pulling from the main branch, we would have to run the extractor and pull the tokens from Figma just to make sure everything is up to date, right? So it still includes a little bit of your manual work. But when it comes to the full automation here, let's talk about the case where we have the designers working somewhere doing their magic, and they publish a new version of the components. What we can do here is we can use the Figma webhooks in order to listen to such an event when the new library version was published. So let's say there is some change in the coloring there. this Figma webhook would take care of pulling the variables by itself. Then when getting the variables, it would still get those design tokens and transform them into the CSS variables that we want to use, for example, in order to style our Angular components. And from there, it would create the PR with all the things that were transformed without basically any intervention of the developer here. So let's try and see how it's going to work alive. So let's say that I have this button component here. I have the text for the button. And I want to change the color of the text to black instead of white. By me here, I mean the designer, of course. So the designer is publishing the components, and we are working on our thing there. What you would add as a result is an error in the demo. Yeah, just a sec. Let's do like this. Okay, let's do again the change. Now let's do it from black to some grayish thing and publish it once again. No. It's all there, believe me. Okay. Yeah. So as a result, if you don't have any complications when it comes to the live demo, so basically what you would get only notified when it comes to the opened PR in the repo containing all the changes when it comes to the changes in the token. So once again, without any of your intervention or your knowledge, by the designer somewhere there, the value of the token pointing to the color of your button text was changed from one value to another. So basically, if you merge this change or you run all the CI pipelines that you have there, testing all the changes and nothing breaks, you can even set it to auto-merge. But basically, this change would land on the production, or at least in your repository, without any manual work when it comes to copying and pasting stuff from Figma or from any other place into the app. So we do have our components library covered, but we still have the rest of the application there. So we have this list of alias tokens defined, and we consider them as readable styles. So we have them as a middleman somewhere between the design and the code, but still we have the rest of the application, like the organism and the apps and the templates. And I'm pretty sure that most of you here played a little bit or do use the Tailwind as an easy solution, right? Because you don't have to create the CSS classes and so on and so forth. You can use the pre-existing ones. So basically, when it comes to the design system, since it's your source of truth and you do have already those tokens in place, why not to reuse them in order to create your custom utility classes instead of using the Tailwind or the PrimeNG has now this Prime Flex utility classes library, so why not to reuse them in order to cover all your needs and still like take everything from the components and the tokens that you already pulled. So when it comes to these alias tokens, what you can do is you can also run a very simple script in order to convert either those global tokens or the alias tokens into the utility classes. So basically, you would use those one in order to style the rest of the pieces of your application. So we have the components covered within the design system. So then here we would expose these utility classes in order to cover the rest of the application, while once again still using the themes, once again still using the same set of design tool, the design units that were set somewhere on the side, and we do pull, and you don't need to use any third-party solution. So because once again, if there is a change somewhere done by not your decision and you do need to make changes in the code, you would have to go to every single place of every single component that you have somewhere in the template and then just those margin tops like empty -1 or whatever, and to adjust them in order to have this pixel perfect environment. But if you use this automation solution to pull stuff from the design tool automatically, the change would be done for you instead of you. So when using the utility token, for example, for the radius or the color or any kind of spacing and the fonts that you use in your application, you would have to do basically nothing. You would just go to the storybook or any other environment and just double check that the change works. And that's basically it. Questions here?
Pancake flip is on. Coffee.
Which Figma license level are you required to do the code-based pushing?
When it comes to the variables, recently you do need the enterprise one. So if you have the organization, it's not possible to use this one. I mean, you can still use it if you want to have a workaround with the styles. In the styles, you can also define pretty much very similar things, but if you want to use like these full layering things in the variables, you would need the enterprise one.
And if I may, right away, the second question, is there any way for me to see in Chrome tools already what is behind the token? Like which value does the token actually mean?
Wait, there do I have Chrome?
Because I see this token value, but what's behind it? Ah, you can just click on it and jump on it. Gotcha.
Nice mustache.
It's true.
Could I also generate SCSS variables, or do I need to use CSS variables?
Once again, sorry?
Could I also generate SCSS variables and not custom properties? Because with that, every developer could override everything.
No. I get what you mean. Yeah, basically the whole approach here is platform agnostic, and when it comes to any preprocessor that you use, it would work. I had it somewhere on this slide. Wait, let's go from this mode to here. So when it comes to using this whole approach, you can transform them any way you want. In the demo here, I did it manually. So I just pulled the variables from there, and I transform them into the CSS tokens. But when it comes to the design system, the well-known practice also, instead of doing it manually, like for the small demo here, you can use the translation so-called tools, for example, like the style dictionary. Then the style dictionary is a tool where you basically define which preprocessor you want to transform your tokens into variables with, and there you would get the tokens from Figma or any designing tool. You would get them into the JSON representation aligned with the design token standard, W3C here. And then you just define, for example, okay, for this badge, I want, I don't know, maybe use Android, so XML. Here, I want like SCSS. Here, I want CSS, and so on and so forth. So any way you want, you can do it there without, once again, doing it manually. So there are translation tools there on the market, and they are free to use. It's an Amazon solution, so you can try this one if you want.
And I have a second question. You need screenshot tests for a process like this, because otherwise the designer could fuck up everything.
That's a good thing. There are also like you mean like screenshots comparison or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, basically the storybook here, it would be also, I mean, I know that you cannot force the designers to do something. They could basically go into the storybook as well and do this like a pixel perfect change in here and the checks, as well as they are also like aware of the fact what's going on. I mean, I know that they would not jump into the styles, right, in the source code. They could only check it from this way, but if you do have time, you can implement the solution by yourself to have the storybook versions, you know, left snapshot to right snapshot, and to show the differences there. It's if you are really seeking for the pet projects, but at the same time, there are some solutions on the market again to use it by for you instead of you. Like this chromatic tool, it's like Chromatica, the owners of the storybook. So once again, when you would have this automatic MR created, you could basically run the pipeline and create the snapshot. So basically it would land, like it would push the changes from the storybook static files to the chromatic, and there you would go to the comparison mode. So you would have left to right in order to see what kind of changes there were. If you're lucky, you would see only changes in the colors or styling. If you're not that lucky, or the designers break something, you would see like these ugly pixels showing, like highlighting all the places that are not there anymore, or some extra things. So there is a way to do so in order to put it into the CI pipeline and automate it fully. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm curious, what's your take on the responsibility in terms of who defines the design tokens and who documents the design tokens? So what's your take on who should be in charge with that?
Would I be mean if I said that we kind of put all the responsibility on the designers here?
No, that's fine. I'm a designer. That's why I'm asking that.
Sorry, oh, moment.
No worries.
I thought we only had developers here. Sorry. Bad news, you would have to do a lot of it. I mean, at the same time, the very beginning of the alignment would include the developers, because they know what they need in terms of like styling the components. But still, when it comes to the token, you would have to define it. You would have to define it in Figma, and the main thing that you need to take care of is the good naming convention for it to make sense, right? So we talked about the global variables. You can define them as you want. If you have multiple themes, you would basically go into the alias, let's say, and I have modes here, right? So every mode here is a different theme that I create, like grouped by the classes. So I just apply the class to my body of the application, and then I have all the list of the variables there that takes care of the styles. You would have to define it, but once and for all, because in your case, if you have those global tokens defined, once again, you are pointing to them every time, right? So you don't have to do it multiple times. But the docs here, coming back to the docs, I would say that I think it's a more responsibility of the developer there to document, because it's the interest of the developer. Once again, if you go back to the Angular material or PrimeNG, we are the developers who are later using those docs, right? If you have a huge organization, you have the component library created, and you expect multiple teams to reuse it, then it's good from the developer perspective to document the API to make sure that you will not get pinged late at night on Slack asking the questions about this and this input, right?
You said it creates a PR immediately. Are there also ways to get this as local commits or on-stage changes, maybe?
I did create the PR automatically, but it's up to you how you implement it. I did it implemented from scratch. It's not something that comes as a package from the Pigma API, of course. It's just like part of the solution that I want to take care of, because in this whole process, the thing that is like the biggest benefits, you kind of reduce the communication here. Even though, okay, you can like your fellow designers, no offense here, but you can. You can like your fellow designers, but at the same time, you kind of automate this whole thing. That's the whole point. So you reduce the communication. And of course, you can go every time, like I said, when you check out and pull from the main branch, it's a practice that we all do. We don't have it automatically, immerse somewhere, and you just magically open the web store of the Visual Studio, and you have all the changes like on the head of the main branch. You can do it just by extracting tokens. It's not a problem. But like this is like more of the advanced approach. So basically, when you would be notified about the changes in the styling, you would get the email or I don't know, pin somewhere on the Slack, that there is a new MR. And if nothing breaks in terms of the pipeline, you don't have to check anything. You can even set it to auto merge if it's successful.
Okay, thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
How I can download this presentation?
You can we share the presentation. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. How do we share it?
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. That was an easy one.
Your turn. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you introduced the frameworks at the beginning, like Angular Material, and Angular Material already provides a pretty large set of variables you can customize. But this customizing approach is, I think, not really well documented by Angular Material. Is it somehow that you can import this in Figma and say, okay, I manage my Angular Material classes there, that I say then the Angular Material buttons change the color, that the primary colors, that I basically reuse what Angular Material already provides?
If when it comes to important stuff from Angular Material to Figma, I think in the third version of a material design, if I'm not wrong, they do have some theming, like customization of the themes possibility. I didn't test it myself. I didn't look into that, to be honest, but I think there is a way there to somehow customize it. But what you can do here, why am I not presenting?
We lost your signal entirely. Like
I am connected to the internet, it's all good. Should I maybe...
Maybe not with the plug. Maybe the beamer's dead.
Okay, I would show you, but the demo, when we share the app, I can put it here. Like for the demo, I basically use this layering approach when it comes to the design system. I use actually the PrimNG components there. So if you want, if you want to reuse a material or any other solution on the market, you can do so. You can still build your own design system, because as you said, sometimes you need to customize a lot. So you can still pull stuff from your, or like at least this. You don't need the components created. Like I didn't have it created in Figma. I just pulled the tokens because I'm not interested in drawing stuff. I'm not a designer, right? I just pull the tokens that I want to use in order to create the components. So there, it's just never-ending loading. So yeah. So there, I use the PrimNG, for example, to customize the basic components a little bit, and I overwrite the styles from PrimNG while still pulling stuff from Figma. So you cannot have like all the designs there. You just need this basic set of rules. You can even define them yourself in the app, but still then you would have this whole maintenance thing. Who knows this song, the semi-roll in the hating? So yeah, a long story short, you can like put your design system on top of the existing design system and override it. Yeah. It's okay.
This is how community works.
And this is like a Pro 3 Max. You were talking about this never-ending power of this tool.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not plugged in, right? It's on battery. So.
What can I say? Yeah, but you have just to trust me that you can do it. I can add it to the slides if you want, like this styling, because I do use like the PrimNG button there just for you to see how it's styled there. So it's okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think like this material design 3, they do have it. Like they do have the possibility to customize it. I'm just saying that I didn't test it myself, but there is a way there.
I think it's material, it's not Angular. The thing is, material is not an Angular thing. Material is something entirely Google thingy.
Hmm?
It's a design system, not connected to Angular. Angular is implementing it in a way.
Yeah, but you can map the properties to the GUI file.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
But that's what you often do. No. It's like two totally like separate things. Yeah, yeah.
There's material for whatever, but Angular is only.
Yeah, that's the whole example of design system, right? You have material for whatever, like you said. Yeah, and then you have somewhere Angular. Yeah, so you can use one to do another, but it's not like one cannot live without another, right?
Okay, I've got a very simple question, maybe a silly question. Is a button?
Yes.
Is a button a atom or a molecule?
That's a good thing. It depends.
Okay.
It depends because it depends very much of what you put inside the atom, and also from one design system to another there is a differentiation, because when it comes to the atom, that is like we discussed here, if you go back to the whole definition thingy, it's like the smallest piece that you cannot break into something small, right? So like let's say that you would take the headline, right? And you can say that you only have the H1 tag there, and this is the component that you want to reuse somewhere and just change the colors or patterns or whatever there. But if you look at the atom, you still can break this thing. Until like 70 years ago, you could break this thing into smaller pieces. So the button can be a molecule and the atom. If you talk about the pure button, that can be an atom, but if you put like the icons or something else on the sides or the subtext, that's already a molecule.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I was curious, what's the effort required to automate all this process? Because maybe I was lucky, but with all projects that I work with, once the design tokens were defined, there were really any case where you need to change them at all. So is it worth spending, I don't know, 1 week to automate this process if you very rarely have to do changes there?
I'm trying to somehow find the words to say that you don't need a week to pull them. You need like a couple of hours to write the script in order to pull them. I mean, if you're talking about this simple scenario where just pull things, it's not hard when you run the script and pull things. If you talk about this whole PR thing, yeah, it would be harder. It depends on whether or not you want to reuse this batch of tokens that you have defined. So if you use them only for styling something, maybe you can consider whether or not it's worth it. But if you talk about, for example, utility classes, that's already a bigger benefit, right? And I think in terms of the performance here, it's easier to get this like batch of the tokens that are pre-processed there, instead of like loading the whole bunch of classes and overriding stuffs. Especially if you talk about some kind of hot fixes or something, still the token is also very easy to override, right from the outside. And when you talk about putting class on top of class, it's a little bit harder to maintain. So I would still go for this approach, but once again, it depends on the size of the application, because if you have like a small pet project, then maybe it's not worth it. But if you're talking about something like bigger, like some kind of app that you still have a couple of people working on, I would consider this approach.
What would be the requirement for the designer? Like, I assume that he needs to define every style with variables in Figma. I'm not very good at Figma, but is that the requirement? That he cannot put any hard-coded values, but everything has to be a variable? And then can you make sure that it is this way, or?
It's a responsibility of the designer here, but yeah, basically they would have to define those things. But as we said before, even if you don't have all the pages there written, sometimes when it comes to the product development, you just get this batch of basic components, and then you're free to go in terms of how you develop them, as like how you place them and style them as a developer. So if you can get like this small batch of components and you do have those variables, you can do it intuitively when it comes to the applying them to the code, right?
Okay. But if I continue his question, so that you cannot really control, oh, thank you. You cannot really control whether a designer is using a hard-coded, there is no like linting tool or something like this for Figma.
In
or is it?
Figma, I don't think so. As once again, I'm not a designer. I'm not like 100% sure when it comes to how to use that in Figma, because in Figma you can either use the variable that you defined here, or you can like hard code the values there. But if you want to, you can validate it from your side if you're pulling stuff there. So you can make sure that there is a correct hierarchy. So like the global, like these global defined variables, they are free to go, like because you just use the raw values. Then when it comes to the level up, like the alias or the component level, you can validate what kinds of things they put there. I mean, basically it's not a mistake, but when it comes to this reusability, that might be a problem there. Let's say you want to keep the raw values until the alias level, and then when it comes to the component, you would need some more abstraction here, right? You would need it to point to the token, so then you can validate this level of like coming from component to the alias. So you can check this pointing when pulling the variables there. Okay. I mean, you use the API, and how you process this is up to you. So if you want, you can validate any response that you get.
Okay, thank you.
More questions, more questions?
Gentleman here and gentleman there.
Only like...
Yeah, okay, no problem. I'll try my best. I have a question. So this way of designing the system looks very good, actually, and especially comparing to something mess I'm working on constantly. But I'm thinking, my question is if it's possible, do you think there is a way to have a step-by-step migration from the not having design tokens or any design approach into something which looks like this one on your presentation?
Yeah, there is a way. So basically you can start with the global ones and replace, like you can pull the global tokens and replace any hard-coded value with the global token. And that would be the migration step one. We actually I'm currently testing it on the like client's application. It's having like a good results where you have like the whole bunch of different styles. So what I do is like I put the global tokens there, and I just point from one place to another, and you already reduce a lot of things there. And then you put another level on the top, and then you end up with the component tokens. But reducing the hard-coded values in the existing styles to point to the global tokens, that would be a step one. And then you would see it's getting easier from there.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I'll ask one more question after the talk. Thank you.
It was a joke. Can I have one more?
Or somehow hang up. Can you reconnect to the call?
Yeah, sure.
Or reshare the screen.
Too late.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try my best to do it as quick as I can. What kind of organization structure of the team? Okay, another way. How would you do this if you are a software developer who wants to have a better developer experience? So you come to the designer team lead and say, hey, maybe do something like this, or some. What is the process do you see here?
Break something first. That's a good approach. No, I'm not sure if it's an answer on the question.
It's more of an answer comment about that, because I'm in between designing and developing. As a designer, it helps completely to have a prototype that works without data, just mock data, that you can change styles and so on and work it with a live environment, not just as the styles. And also because you said basically that you don't have to communicate so much because everything is automated. But it's also if you have a live system, a live prototype that you developed, which has the same basis, that it makes it easier for the designer to test, even if he works in Sigma or something, in Figma, and use this workflow, then he can immediately see changes he did in the design, in the context, in the app context that you have. And that is so helpful, I think, in both directions. So more of a comment than a question, sorry.
Yeah. What can you do here is like the tested approach. You just do the demo, like demo of how much time it takes you in order to apply the change versus just, you know, triggering this pool and just seeing alive, even in Storybook, how it would land there, you know, because you just need to pull the change from Figma and Storybook refreshes, like the re-renders the component, then there is a change there. So when you see this, when you show this magic, then when there is a light somewhere in the eyes of the management or whoever you want to impress, and then you can start with the pitch of this process.
Start with business first.
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. I will add a last question, and then I guess we call it a day.
Yeah.
It was your first talk. Did you do it on free will, or did you get forced to do it? Half.
If you find a person later on walking around Vienna without a passport, please help me.
Second, after your first talk, how you feel?
I appreciate the questions. I hope that there is some interest when it comes to this whole thing. I got a lot of questions as a designer, but let's agree on the fact that we are all lazy and we are looking for the process of the automation. So look into that and trust me that your life will get easier. I will share the slides. And if you want to get an in-depth, like a really, really deep dive, there is also one cool thing. We do have a blog. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
It's somewhere here.
It's somewhere here. Yeah. Can I show the whole nice page that we have here? But we do have a blog, and you can find the articles on the blog about how to master this design to code process, starting from the step 0 as we discussed Figma, and then having everything working in the code. So start from step 1, understand, we were asking also how to start with that, understand how this whole thing is working, because it was just an introduction, but you can get a deep dive here in order to make it for you easier to understand what is the real benefit of the design system.
Woo! Loud round of applause.